Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever it is that you are and wherever you may be. Thank you very much for making us a part of your day. I am Brad Franklin, a creative content writer here in Chesterfield. I'm very glad to tell you that Chesterfield Behind the Mic is on the air once again. Now, there are lots of different topics at various points in the year where we're tasked with kind of sharing important information, both in terms of things that are coming up soon, maybe events that folks are able to attend. And then there are also these things that are super helpful for folks to just kind of have an idea of how things work. And I would kind of put this podcast, the one we're about to do here on CVTA, kind of in that bucket where it's like this is a chance for folks to get a sense of the way that CVTA makes a real impact on not just communities like Chesterfield, but in Chesterfield specifically. I'm very glad to have Chet Parsons from CVTA here. Chet, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks. I'm doing great.
I really appreciate you coming on. Appreciate you talking to us a little bit about CVTA. Before we do that, and we talk about what the CVTA is, the Central Virginia Transportation Authority, for those of you scoring at home, let's recap a little bit of your background before we recap what CVTA does. Now, you're somebody, obviously, who has worked in this for a long time. Tell the folks sort of about your background, how it is that you kind of came to be working with CVTA.
Yeah, so I'm a transportation planner by trade. Got my master's degree at VCU and worked here with the Planning District Commission right out of school. Mm-hmm. Got a lot of great experience with all the different jurisdictions in the region.
Right.
Then I was able to do some private sector work to see what it's like on the other side, and then had the opportunity to come back to Richmond about 5 years ago to be the director of transportation at Plan RVA.
Yeah. Now, in terms of the CVTA, is working with the CVTA and doing the work that you do, at what point did this become sort of like a focal point for you? I'm guessing as a kid, did you grow up thinking that this is where, the kind of thing you were into, or was this type of work something that really sort of caught your attention, at a certain point in life? How did this sort of come to be for you?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I have always been interested in transportation. I did not know that planning was an actual thing. So, I mean, while I was looking at graduate school, I came up with some options for planning and planning programs, and it's a neat field because it's more than just infrastructure. It's also sociology and politics and all the things like in the room together. Yeah. So it's a great opportunity to stay technical, which is what I normally am.
Right.
But to kind of mix that with working with people. Mm-hmm. Finding ways to get things moving forward and working together to make the region better. Yeah,
and that's a really good point at the end, because I was actually just thinking, like, you think about people and especially for Americans, the idea of being able to get in your car and go somewhere is such a central sort of tenet in a lot of ways, right? Like the idea of that freedom, right, to be able to get in your car and drive to wherever. Now, I think that in terms of traffic and in terms of safety and in terms of these projects that we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, the CVTA's, but the potential that something like this can have on, an entire region, as we have here. Tell the folks a little bit about how the CVTA came to be. 9 localities and a group of places that are essentially trying to do for themselves what would otherwise be really almost impossible, right? For some of these roadways, for some of these projects to come to fruition. How does the CVTA work, and what's the best way for folks to sort of wrap their arms around what it does and what it is?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just a little bit to step back, maybe 2013, 2 regional authorities were created in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads.
Right.
They, after that point, saw a huge share of state and federal money going their way,
right?
Because they were able to put their own funding into an application,
right,
and make it more attractive to whoever was scoring.
Right.
The leaders in our region watched that for a number of years and finally decided, you know what, we need to compete.
Right. Yeah.
So in 2020, the General Assembly took up a bill sponsored by Dolores McQuinn to take a look at creating an authority kind of like the other two, but a little bit different in our region. And it had overwhelming support. And from then we just took off.
Now, in terms of the region itself, I feel like for those who live in various locations as a part of this 9, they probably feel like some other part of the 9 gets the attention of this or the attention of that. And it's kind of nice that in something like this, that all parties can be, have a voice at that table, can kind of help to make those decisions. In terms of the leadership of the CVTA, and you can kind of jump in here whenever I misstep, but my understanding is that essentially each locality is involved in that board. They're all making decisions together. It truly is a group effort to sort of solve these transportation problems. I mean, it is essentially the CVTA's central purpose is, I guess, to accelerate fixing transportation issues throughout Central Virginia. We're going to talk through some projects here in a second that are, some of them are Chesterfield focused, some of them are just some projects around sort of the region. But I think one thing that I want to sort of focus on before we do that is this is an opportunity for, and I think it's really important for folks to understand, like, this is an opportunity for projects that essentially would just not happen. They would not score well the way that maybe the state scores it or whatever. Can you help folks understand why these projects are more viable if they go through the CVTA route? Is it simply just because of the amount of funding and that sort of local portion being, that problem being solved before it goes, to the other entities, or is there some other rhyme or reason as to how these projects will come to fruition because of the CVTA versus ones that just would not happen if it wasn't for something like this? Yeah,
I mean, I think the biggest thing, two big points. The first is the existence of the CVTA allows the region to help itself.
Right.
Now, we don't have to wait to depend on money that really isn't there.
Right.
Because the needs far outweigh the supply.
Right.
In every case, and that doesn't change with the CVTA. But we have some tools in our toolbox to help us move those projects forward faster.
Right.
The other thing is the split in funding. So the revenue comes in. Half of all the revenue that we get goes back to the jurisdictions.
Right.
So Chesterfield has already gotten, lifetime to date, almost $80 million out of the CVTA that directly comes back and it can be used for whatever is necessary.
Right.
The other big part of it is the regional projects. So the big regional projects that pass certain criteria are then sponsored and allocated funds by the CVTA, and I think that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, let's start with something Chesterfield specific. Let's start with the Woolward Road. And this is a project here to construct a new 4-lane road between Route 288 and Old 100. Includes a bridge, shared use path, and a sidewalk. I think it's $37 million and change. What are some of the time frames for this project, and how do you guys at CVTA see this impacting the sort of bigger picture here for the traffic flow in and around Woolward Road?
Yeah, so the time frames for Woolward Road, I mean, you got just about everything. There's also a hybrid roundabout at Old 100.
Okay.
Interchange at 288 Woolridge. So lots of really cool stuff that'll provide a lot of mobility options for people.
And is that really the central, because it feels like maybe some of the different projects, at least that are coming right now, mobility is like the biggest thing, right? It's just figuring out what ways to take some sort of congestion, some sort of traffic element off the table and providing some solutions. I'm guessing that's a big part of not just this project, but a lot of the ones you guys see.
Yeah, it's a huge part. I mean, the rest of the region isn't one look everywhere you go. So there's going to be lots of people in different situations that need options. Yeah. And that's part of what the funding goes towards, is providing those options. Right.
So I'm sorry. So you said the time frame for that one is?
Time frame for that one is starting FY22. Okay. So the work has already started.
Yep.
And this is just a portion of the project, but we're looking at in the next 2 to 3 years.
Yeah. Which, and again, I want to stress to folks, as you're hearing these numbers and these, timelines, one, everything is somewhat dependent on lots of different factors that are as a part of this. So anytime, we're talking about projected dates and that kind of thing. But the second part of that is, again, these are projects that would not have happened. It's especially not on the time frames in which they will happen because of CVTA. That's a case, obviously, at 95 and Route 10, the phase 2 of that interchange project. Construct remaining elements of a partial cloverleaf interchange with, they're going to remove the loops and signalize the ramps at $17 million there. Now, this is phase 2 of that project. Once this portion is completed, what does the rest of that project look like? How many phases are there in that one? And how is the CVTA sort of helping make all that happen?
Yeah, so CVTA funds right now are being used to advance the preliminary engineering.
Right.
So kind of laying out the need, making that case for all the rest of the funds that are going to be necessary.
Right.
So phase 2 is removing weaving sections on I-95 and Route 10 by removing the northbound loop ramps.
Yep.
Signalizing the southbound and northbound off-ramp intersections at Route 10. Widening the off-ramp at the Route 10 interchange to provide
really nice. 3
left turn lanes to eastbound. Widening the northbound off-ramp to provide dual left turn lanes to westbound 10. Mm-hmm. And then constructing a 600-foot single-lane driveway to I guess there's a facility at the southwest loop.
Gotcha.
Yep.
And in terms of the time frame for that, is phase 2... Is it 2 phase, 3 phase? What's the big picture for that entire project?
Yeah, it's a big project, and it's got the interstate involved.
Yeah.
So we're looking at FY23, the start, which is, it's underway, the PE part. And then I think we're looking out to FY28.
Okay. So it's going to take a while, but obviously you can't run before you walk.
Yeah.
Right?
But I think the thing to note for all these projects is, if we were dependent on federal assistance, it'd be way longer than that.
Yeah, which, like I said, is a real theme for these things because as I sort of looked at these, which is obviously the case on 362, like this is a project to widen 360 between Woodlake Parkway and Otterdale Road. It feels like Otterdale Road is everywhere, in terms of like all the different things that need to happen to it. The attention that it gets from folks who are trying to solve different traffic questions and that kind of thing. So they extend the 6-lane section with sidewalks on both sides at $20 million. Again, that's a pretty substantial project. And how do you see is it just more capacity and that's what helps with the traffic flow? Is it more moving things around? What's the big kind of focus for that one?
Yeah, I think it's for this one it's interesting because it's how developed it is in that corridor. So the question is property. That's the big factor here.
Yeah.
What's the biggest bang for the buck without impacting more and more people?
Yeah.
So the widening is something that is being considered. And right now, this is kind of the bread and butter of the CVTA is to provide leverage funds.
Right.
So the funding that CVTA is going to provide will go into a smart scale application that the county is going to submit.
Right.
And that'll help sponsor the right-of-way acquisition and the eventual construction.
Now you said something there a second ago. I want to really quickly touch on. You said smart scale.
Yes.
For folks who have no idea what that means, explain to the good folks what smart scale is and how that really matters when it comes to these kinds of things.
Sure. Yeah. Smart scale is this program that's been in place. There's been 5 rounds of funding. They're getting ready to open up round 6 next spring. It's a VDOT sponsored program where every jurisdiction, municipality in the Commonwealth can apply for funding assistance for the projects that they need the most.
Right.
Super data driven, lots of detail in the applications. Our region has traditionally done okay, but not great.
Yep.
Because we're competing with Northern Virginia and the Tidewater.
Right.
So the ability simple case, if you have an application that's a $20 million application and you weigh that against an application that's a $20 million application with $5 million in CVTA funds, guess which one's going to win?
Guess which one's going to win?
So that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense in terms of not just what the specific localities among the 9 want, but also as a group.
Yes,
the 9 want, because the better you can do here, the better you can do there.
Right,
and that certainly takes a lot of the pressure off. I want to move to a one Green City Connector Trail and Bridge. It's a creation of a pedestrian and bicycle connection between the Green City development in Rico and the Fall Line Trail. Now, Fall Line Trail around Chesterfield. people. You say Fall Line Trail, and folks are, their ears perk up, right? Because it's a very sought after, very beloved. People are very excited about what this will mean. This project is just under $10 million. Again, the Fall Line is a huge piece of the puzzle in Central Virginia as a whole, and especially I know folks around Chesterfield love it. What went into this project getting funded, and why? What does this do for the Fall Line?
Yeah, so I think stepping back on the Fall Line background, CVTA's first action after it was created was to commit $104 million to the Fall Line.
Right.
That's going to get a portion of it built.
Yeah.
We've got 2 design build projects that are underway, one on the northern end, one on the southern end. So we're getting from Ashland all the way through Hanover County across to Chickahominy.
Right.
And then from the southern shore of the Appomattox north into Chesterfield.
Right.
The Green City Connector is going to be a good working example of the utility of the fall line. It's going to be different than every other trail you've ever been on, because it's going to provide access to all kinds of different community opportunities, work, jobs, school.
Right.
So the Green City is going to connect to the new development in Henrico with the theater, amphitheater, and all the other amenities.
Right.
And it's going to provide real direct access for not just like people out trying to recreate, but people going from their house to their job or somewhere else.
And speaking of connecting things, the widening of I-64 east here, obviously, is I think it's 29 miles of between New Kent from the 205 to the James City County line, I think, $100 million, which you just said 104. There's another 100 million.
Right.
I know for a lot of people, anybody who goes to the beach, anybody who goes to the 757, not to put too fine a point on, but that entire stretch of road is pretty terrible. It's not a fun day. And sometimes I know plenty of people who would think to themselves like, hey, I probably don't want to look at trying to go to Busch Gardens or whatever you might want to do, simply because the traffic is going to be, such a headache. But this is obviously a big picture, big ticket item, a big focus for not just CVTA now, but obviously going forward, because this is going to take a lot. What do you think this project will mean for travel throughout this portion of the state?
I think it's going to be a game changer. I mean, it's going to complete the connection.
Yeah.
So that level of congestion that everybody has experienced for years and years will be greatly alleviated.
Yeah.
But in addition to just traveling, you're going to get your Amazon boxes quicker. I mean, you're going to
really good point. Actually.
All the industry in Richmond region is going to greatly benefit from having increased efficiency.
That's a really good point. I had not even considered that aspect of you see these results because you travel them, but there's a lot of other stuff that also travels them, and so everything will move a lot smoother.
Biggest port in the world is in Norfolk.
That's a really good point. Yeah. Last one, the interchange at 623 off Ashland Road off 64. A diverging diamond, which I'm really curious. I want to talk more about that in a second. Essentially, provide economic development access off 64. It's a $33.7 million project. It's a substantial one, but I want to ask you first about the diverging diamond. For a lot of folks, these types of new, I say new. I know they're not necessarily. It's not like somebody just figured it out yesterday. But explain what diverging diamond means, and talk to me a little bit about the impact of this type of project.
Sure, a traditional overpass on an interstate is something that everybody's been on.
Right.
Diverging diamond is unique because you're essentially eliminating conflict points.
Yes.
So. But it takes a little bit of getting used to.
Yes.
So a diverging diamond, you're essentially, if you're trying to cross, if you're going into the overpass over an interstate, a traveler would essentially go into the oncoming lane.
Yes.
And then come back when they get over the bridge.
Yep. And anybody who's gone to Charlottesville goes through Zion Crossroads.
That's right.
That's the one I know the most. And let me tell you what, that place used to be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah.
And now it flows just as smooth and as sweet. It's absurd how easily and how great this thing works.
Yeah. There's another one that's really functional up in Stafford County.
Okay.
Right near a huge recreation complex.
I feel like as often as we can with new construction, and I feel like at some point when that new interchange goes off 64 in Henrico, just north of Short Pump at the Gayton Road, I think they're probably going to do something similar there. It's weird because for those of us old school drivers, the idea of you're crossing over to the other side of the road, I mean, it just feels very foreign. And yet the whole, if you cross over and you're going to get off on the interstate, you just bloop over and it's good. Yeah. And obviously there's no turn on right, no right turn on red kind of stuff in this kind of thing. But the flow of traffic will be demonstrably better. And I know for a lot of folks, roundabouts and these kinds of different ideas and solutions for solving these kinds of traffic problems have been, sometimes it's been hard for folks, but this is the kind of thing I think that I kind of hope catches on because it makes a lot of sense.
Well, the big common factor in all of the projects we look at these days is safety.
Yeah.
If we can start to reduce serious and fatal injuries, That's what's going to drive the investment. So that's what a diverging diamond does.
Yeah. Last thing before we get you out of here, in terms of, we just went through a handful of projects, a whole lot of money that is being talked about. These projects are, road projects in general now, right? They're just expensive. And like you said, the big point here is leveraging local money to put with other funding to sort of make these things possible. This might actually be an impossible question to answer, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. If there was no CVTA and some of these projects were wanted, how long would it take? Would they ever actually, in your estimation, would they ever actually get built? Would they ever actually become real, tangible things? Because I'm trying to give people an idea of like the CVTA and its direct impact. Because I think what they're going to happening is a lot of folks are just going to know that the CVTA is part of the process by which these things just happen. But I'm curious to get your point of view on if the CVTA wasn't a thing, how long would something like Woolridge Road actually take? How long would that interchange on 95 and 10? That's a multi-phase project.
Right.
Can you even put your arms around that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's a complicated thing. Like, I don't think it's a yes or no kind of question, but the CVTA allows a project to be considered by its merits, and it doesn't factor in, you need a seasoned legislator that has the respect of all their peers to champion the project at the General Assembly, or things like that. You need a congressperson that knows the right people to get it pushed forward. I think you could safely estimate that there'd be at least a 10-year delay in getting projects funded.
Which, if you think about it, every project, 10 years, you push everything out, problems get worse. So the solutions that you're able to solve here make that the projects you're going to do later are going to be cheaper because you're going to get to them sooner. So it really does help. And like you said, it takes a lot of the guessing game out of Richmond and the General Assembly.
The more time that goes by, the bigger impacts inflation has.
That's a really good point.
And we've been watching that just tick up like crazy the past couple of years.
I bet. Well, Chet, thank you very much for coming on the podcast, talking to us about the CVTA. We really appreciate your time today.
It was fun. Thanks.
All right. Now, make sure you check us out on social media. On Twitter, it's at Chesterfield VA, and on Instagram, it's Chesterfield Virginia, all one word. And on Facebook, you can check out our podcast page. Just search Chesterfield Behind the Mic. Now, make sure to follow or subscribe to the podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or wherever it is that you get your shows. If you're so inclined to give us a rating or review, we'd greatly appreciate it. As always, a video version of the show is available on our YouTube channel as well as on our website, Chesterfield.gov/podcast. That's also where you can submit feedback anytime, make some suggestions, or just reach out to us. You can also watch the show on WCCT Thursday through Sunday at 7, on the weekends at noon. That's Comcast Channel 98 and Verizon Channel 28. Lastly, you can check out Chesterfield.gov/connect with us to find out a number of other ways to connect with Chesterfield County. My thanks to my director, Martin Stith, my executive producer, Teresa, Bonifas, and all the good folks from Constituent and Media Services for all they do. And my thanks to you for joining us today. So, from all of us here in Chesterfield, thanks again for making us a part of your day. We'll see you again real soon. Take good care. From blogs to podcasts, newsletters to alerts, social media, the latest community news, our Connect With Us webpage has you covered. Chesterfield.gov/connect with us, your source for all things Chesterfield.